You didn't become a people pleaser because you wanted to. You became one because, at some point, you had no choice. Maybe it started with a parent who only loved you when you performed, when you got the grades, smiled at the right time, kept quiet when they were angry. Or maybe it was silence, cold shoulders, that subtle punishment when you dared to say no. So you learned something dangerous. If I give them what they want, I get to stay safe. That's how it begins, not as kindness, but as survival. And from there, it evolves. You start to shape yourself into whatever people need. You become the friend who always says, "No worries, I got it." The partner who swallows their feelings to keep the peace. The worker who never takes a break, never complains, never stops. And everyone around you? They love it because you make their lives easier. They don't see the cost. They don't see you crumbling inside, screaming quietly behind every "sure, no problem." Because somewhere along the way you confused love with usefulness. You thought if you made enough people happy, you'd finally be enough to stay. But here's the dark truth. When your value is built on being needed, you'll never feel safe unless someone's needing you. And the moment they don't, you panic. You overgive. You over-apologize. You overperform. Not because you're generous, but because you're scared. Scared that without a role to play, without something to fix, without a need to fulfill, you're nothing. And that fear is so deep, you'll betray yourself to avoid feeling it. You'll abandon your needs, suppress your anger, numb your exhaustion just to keep the illusion going. But illusions have a price. And eventually, you burn out. You hit that point where the mask cracks and even you can't pretend you're okay anymore. The saddest part? Most people don't even notice. They're so used to taking from you that when you finally collapse, they act surprised. What happened? You were always so strong. No, you were just quiet about your pain. You were just too afraid to make it someone else's problem. But now it is a problem, and you're the only one paying for it. So the question becomes, how long will you keep breaking yourself to keep others comfortable? How long will you keep playing a role that's killing you quietly? Because the truth is, no one is coming to save you from this pattern. No one is going to wake up one day and say, "Hey, you've given too much, let me carry you now." They won't. Not because they're evil, but because you trained them to expect this. You taught them that your needs don't exist, that your boundaries are negotiable, that your silence means consent. And unlearning that starts with you. Starts here. Now. It always starts small, a favor here, an extra task there, a "sure, I can help" when your whole body is screaming no. But that's the trick. It never feels toxic in the beginning. It feels appreciated. You feel wanted, useful, safe. Until suddenly, you're not a person anymore. You're a resource, an emotional sponge, a human band-aid for everyone else's wounds. And you start to notice things. People only call when they need something, only text when they're in crisis, only show up when it benefits them. And you keep showing up because it's what you do, even when it drains you, even when you're dying inside. Why? Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, you still believe that your worth is measured by your sacrifice. You think, if I just give more, love harder, try harder, they'll finally see me, finally stay, finally love me back. But they don't. Because people don't fall in love with your boundaries. They fall in love with your availability, your silence, your anything you need. And over time, they stop seeing it as kindness. They see it as currency, a transaction they never agreed to. You give, they take. And when you finally ask for something, suddenly you're too much, dramatic, selfish. That's the double bind of being a people pleaser. You train people to expect everything and then resent them for never offering anything back. But they're just following the script you wrote, the unspoken contract you never made explicit. If I take care of you, maybe you'll take care of me. Only, they never agreed to that. Because when you give without boundaries, people stop seeing your pain as real. They only see your function, your reliability, your availability. And the moment you break that pattern, the moment you say no or ask for help or fall apart, they don't see a person finally reaching their limit. They see a broken vending machine, and suddenly, you're the problem. You're not like you used to be. You're difficult now. You've changed. Yes, you have. Because you finally realized being everything for everyone is the fastest way to disappear. You become invisible not because people don't love you, but because they've only ever seen what you do for them, not who you are underneath. And let's be honest, do you even know who you are underneath? Who are you when you're not needed? Who are you when no one's asking for anything? Who are you when you're not performing? That's the terrifying question that haunts people pleasers. If I'm not useful, do I even matter? And until you face that fear, until you stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's approval, you will keep giving, keep breaking, keep disappearing, and no one will stop you, because they don't see you falling apart. You made sure of that. You made it easy for them not to notice. So now, the choice is yours. Do you keep playing the part, or do you finally walk off the stage and start learning who the hell you are when no one's watching? Let's talk about the guilt, the kind that wraps around your throat when you even think about saying no, the kind that makes you feel like a monster for wanting something as simple as rest, peace, silence. It's not just guilt, it's programming. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that love is earned, not given. You learned that to be safe, you had to be small, pleasant, agreeable, predictable. You became an expert at reading the room, at sensing tension before it exploded, at shrinking yourself so no one else had to feel uncomfortable, and they called you mature for it. Empathetic, kind, but it wasn't kindness, it was survival. You weren't being nice, you were being strategic. If they're happy, you're safe. If they're pleased, you're wanted. If they need you, they won't leave. That's the core wound. Love, for you, has always been a negotiation. You don't just want to be loved, you want to be needed. Because if they need you, they can't abandon you. Right? Wrong. Because here's the truth, no one told you. Needing you was never the same as loving you. People can need you every day and still not respect you. They can use you as a crutch and still disappear the moment you need support. You think your giving is keeping them close, but all it's doing is making you easier to leave. Because the more you overfunction, the less they have to show up. And the more you disappear behind the mask of, "I've got it," the lonelier it gets. You'll find yourself in rooms full of people who adore you, but don't know a damn thing about you. People who sing your praises, but wouldn't notice if you cried yourself to sleep every night. You're not surrounded by love. You're surrounded by people who benefit from your self-abandonment. And here's the kicker. The moment you start healing, the moment you stop giving 100% to people who give you 10, they'll say you're selfish, you've changed, you've lost your spark. Because your burnout was their convenience, your silence was their comfort, your exhaustion made their lives easier. So when you reclaim yourself, don't expect applause, expect resistance, expect pushback, expect the ones who benefited from your brokenness to call your healing betrayal. But let them be uncomfortable. Let them fall away. Because if the only version of you they can love is the one who never says no, that's not love. That's dependency dressed up in fake affection. You're not here to be a mirror for other people's egos. You're not a tool, a fixer, a savior. You're a person with limits, with needs, with worth that doesn't shrink just because someone else can't see it. So ask yourself, are you willing to be disliked in order to finally be free? Because the cost of your people-pleasing isn't just your time or energy, it's your life. And one day, if you're not careful, you'll wake up and realize you gave it all away to be loved by people who never even knew who you were. There's a moment in every people-pleaser's life when the mask starts to crack, when you're standing in a room, smiling, laughing, nodding, and something inside you whispers, "This isn't me." You try to drown it out with busyness, with niceties, with another "sure, I can help," even though you're already on fire. But the whisper gets louder, and eventually it becomes a roar, a breakdown, an explosion, or worse, a quiet collapse no one notices because you've trained everyone to believe you're fine. You've become so good at performing okay that you've forgotten what real okay even feels like. So you start to question, who am I when I'm not what they need me to be? You've spent so long curating yourself for other people's comfort, you don't even know your own preferences anymore. You can't decide what restaurant you like because you've always gone with the flow. You can't tell what excites you because you've been living on someone else's schedule. You can't even cry properly because somewhere down the line, someone told you your feelings were too much. And here's the mind f*** of it all. You thought people-pleasing would bring connection, belonging, security, but all it ever gave you was performance, resentment, emptiness. You're constantly surrounded, but never seen, liked but not known, needed but never chosen. You've become the emotional vending machine. Push a button, get validation. Push a button, get support. Push a button, get silence when it's convenient. And the worst part, you keep letting them. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere deep down, you believe this is the best you can get. That love will always be transactional. That affection must always be earned. But what if it's not? What if love isn't supposed to feel like debt? What if your worth doesn't hinge on how useful you are? You've built your identity around being needed, but need is not love. Obligation is not intimacy. Approval is not acceptance. Real love sees you. Real love sees you, even when you're not convenient, even when you're messy, complicated, emotional, angry, unsure, and you know it's terrifying. If you stop people-pleasing, if you stop being the version of you that made everyone else comfortable, some people will walk away. Good, because what leaves when you're finally honest was never really yours to begin with. And what stays, that's where the healing begins. There's a dangerous lie buried in the heart of people-pleasing, that if you just become enough, they'll finally stay, finally love you, finally stop hurting you. But here's the truth. You could twist yourself into every possible shape, shrink yourself, silence yourself, sacrifice yourself, and it still wouldn't be enough for someone who only loves you when you're useful. You were never the problem. Their love was, because it came with terms and conditions, unspoken rules, and a quiet ultimatum. Be who I want, or I'll withhold everything you crave. And so you complied, you performed, you smiled even when it hurt, you apologized even when it wasn't your fault. You gave until there was nothing left, and then they blamed you for being empty. You learned to internalize it, to believe the fault was yours, that if you just tried harder they wouldn't have pulled away, that if you'd just been better, they wouldn't have betrayed you, that maybe, just maybe, if you were perfect, they would have finally stayed. But perfection doesn't protect you, it enslaves you, because people don't leave because you failed. They leave because it was never about you to begin with. They leave because your pain makes them uncomfortable, because your needs feel like an inconvenience, because your authenticity exposes their manipulation. People-pleasers don't get abandoned because they're unlovable. They get abandoned because they stop being easy to control. And that's when the mask finally shatters, when you realize they didn't love you. They loved the version of you that made them feel powerful, safe, superior. And once that illusion dies, so does the relationship. It's a brutal awakening, but it's also your liberation. Because when someone walks away after you stop pretending, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the loss of control. You never lost them. They were never yours. They were just renting the version of you. You thought you had to be to feel worthy of love. But your worth doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself when everyone else taught you to disappear. And that moment, when you stop chasing love and start embodying it, that's when you become unstoppable. But here's the part no one tells you. When you finally stop pleasing, people will panic. Not because you've changed, but because they can no longer use the old version of you. They'll say you're selfish, too cold, too distant, too full of yourself. They'll accuse you of everything the thing they once applauded when it served them. But don't shrink, don't explain, don't apologize for evolving, because the world will always try to punish those who break the mold of obedience. People will project their fear onto your freedom. They'll call your clarity arrogance, your boundaries cruel, your honesty attitude. But that's the tax you pay for no longer being available to emotional leeches. And make no mistake, you were never weak. You were just conditioned to mistake approval for love, to confuse survival with connection, to call betrayal normal and silence peace. But now you see it. You see how they trained you to abandon yourself first, so they wouldn't have to. You see how your need to be loved became a leash they pulled whenever they pleased. But you cut that leash, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because once you taste the power of being true to yourself, no approval can compare. Not theirs, not the world's, not even the version of you that once begged to be accepted. You no longer need to be liked to feel whole, because now you belong to yourself. And in a world that profits from your self-betrayal, that is the ultimate rebellion. So here's to the ones who broke the cycle, who burned the mask, who chose the terrifying, beautiful path of becoming real. You may lose people, but you'll gain something greater, yourself. And that was the plan all along.